On a distant planet, a princess teetered on the edge of death. The entire palace and its scientists watched helplessly as technology and tradition failed to save her. Then, an unexpected stranger, a human, stepped into the palace's glowing corridors and with a single daring act offered his blood. No one believed it could work, yet his bold choice did more than save a life. It shattered the rules of an entire society, challenged the meaning of courage, and forever changed what it meant to be a hero. The chamber was alive with a faint hum that seemed almost musical, a vibration that ran through the polished crystal floors and along the walls of translucent metal, as if the palace itself were breathing. Seralya lay on the bed of glowing quartz, her long silver hair spilling like liquid moonlight across the surface, framing a face so delicate it seemed carved from starlight. Her ears, long and elegant, flicked intermittently, catching the subtlest shifts of sound in the room, the whispers of attendants, the clicking of monitors, and the low thrum of the life support hum. The princess's skin glimmered faintly, the veins under her pale flesh traced with an almost luminescent glow, as though her own body were a fragile constellation. Outside, the city floated on colossal anti-gravity platforms, drifting above the violet storms that churned across Virelia's lower atmosphere, a spectacle both beautiful and terrifying. The clouds below glowed faintly, reflecting the city's light in 1,000 shifting hues, like molten gemstones flowing in slow motion. The attendants moved quietly around the bed, robes whispering against the floor as they adjusted instruments and read holographic displays. There was a tension in the air, thick and almost visible, though it was occasionally broken by the nervous snorts or coughs of those trying not to seem anxious. The monitors flared erratically, registering Seralia's vital signs with a dramatic series of beeps and colored pulses, each spike or drop a note in an unsteady symphony of life and imminent danger. "We've never seen such instability," one scientist muttered, adjusting the projection of a blood oxygen graph that swirled with faint, rainbow-colored particles. "Even our simulations, well, they didn't account for this level of—" Yeah, interrupted a junior technician, not entirely sure how to phrase it without sounding incompetent. "The princess is, basically dying." But very elegantly. There was a soft ripple of nervous laughter, quickly stifled. Seralia's eyes fluttered open slightly, revealing irises like liquid mercury that reflected the bioluminescent room. Her lips curled faintly, a wry smile that seemed almost impossible given her condition. "I hope none of you are planning a dramatic funeral before breakfast," she murmured, voice faint but sharp, the corners of her mouth twitching in the faintest humor. The words, though soft, carried a ripple through the room, part astonishment, part relief, and entirely unexpected. The chief physician, a tall figure with multiple eyes, each capable of seeing different wavelengths, huffed softly and muttered about protocols, but even he could not entirely hide a twitch of amusement at the princess's timing. "We need a donor," he said finally, adjusting a holographic display that shimmered above the bed, projecting potential matches, all alien, all incompatible. "No species has blood compatible with hers. It's unprecedented." The statement was meant to terrify, but it fell flat against the quiet amusement that began to surface in the room. A small, awkward cough drew every eye toward the doorway, and there he was. Marcus, the human, standing stiffly in a borrowed robe several sizes too large, clearly aware of every eye upon him. He shuffled forward, kicking the edge of a floating platform and nearly toppling a hovering tray of instruments. Hello," he said, voice cracking just slightly. "So, I have, blood. I think it might work. Or, it might explode. But, probably work." His attempt at humor landed unevenly, producing a mixture of nervous giggles and incredulous stares. The attendants froze. The monitors shifted, blinking in panic and curiosity, as if they too were trying to process the audacity of a human offering his blood to a princess of a species that considered humans charmingly primitive at best and catastrophically incompatible at worst. Seralia's ears twitched, the long points bending slightly forward, sensing the shift in energy in the room. Her lips curved upward and she gave a small, amused sigh. "Well," she said, her voice soft but carrying enough authority to hush the whispers, "at least someone is offering to make breakfast interesting." Marcus approached the crystalline bed, trying to keep his nerves in check, and tripped over the edge of a low grav-field barrier, catching himself with a hand that knocked several hovering instruments into mild orbit. "Okay," he muttered, brushing off his embarrassment and trying to sound competent. "So, don't panic. I'm a human, I may look like I'm flailing, but I know what I'm doing, probably." The chief physician reluctantly nodded, giving a hesitant thumbs up to initiate the transfusion. The procedure began with a faint hiss as plasma conduits extended from Marcus's arm to the princess, glowing slightly as the alien monitors tracked the flow. The entire room seemed to exhale collectively, tension mixed with curiosity, as the unthinkable happened. The human blood began to integrate. Tiny sparks of bioluminescence flickered along Seralia's veins, matching the rhythm of the monitors that now pulsed in vibrant colors, a spectacle that was almost hypnotic. "What is happening?" whispered one junior attendant leaning over a floating console. "Is it alive or art?" "Both," muttered another, trying not to sound sarcastic but failing. "And don't forget improbable." Seralia's body, once a fragile constellation of failing life signs, now glimmered with renewed energy. Her long ears twitched and pivoted in amusement as she tried to sit up, wincing slightly but managing a weak laugh. "Marcus," she said, voice laced with humor despite the faint pallor of her cheeks, "if I survive this, you're officially banned from borrowing my robes again. They do not suit humans." Marcus, flushed with both pride and relief, stammered, That's fine. I know, wait, thanks for letting me, help. Not explode, I mean, help." Outside the chamber, the city's floating platforms shimmered under the twin moons of Violia, unaware of the quiet revolution happening within a palace of crystal and light. The monitors outside the royal halls, linked to every household and data stream, began flashing wild patterns as the unprecedented human-alien blood transfusion took place. Citizens paused midair in levitating gardens, drones hovered with uncertain protocols, and everywhere the message was the same. Something impossible was happening, and yet it worked. Seralia's eyes, once dull with weakness, now reflected the room's glow, sharp and mischievous. She leaned slightly closer to Marcus, a faint chuckle escaping her lips. "I see humans are far more inconvenient than I imagined," she said, voice laced with amusement. "And apparently essential. You'll be remembered, Marcus, though not without mockery." He grinned awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "I'll take what I can get," he said. "Besides, you're alive. That's kind of the main win, right?" And for the first time since the crisis began, the court laughed. Not the stifled, polite laughter of protocol, but genuine, relieved laughter, filling the chamber with warmth that even the alien walls could not dampen. Outside, the city of floating lights pulsed in rhythm with the renewed vitality of a princess. And a human, entirely out of place but entirely heroic, stood at the center of it all, proving that courage, humor, and a slightly clumsy approach could indeed defy expectation, even across galaxies. The palace buzzed in an entirely new way the morning after the transfusion, a subtle hum beneath the crystalline arches that seemed almost alive. Outside the high windows, the twin suns of Violia rose slowly, their amber and violet light spilling across the city, catching the floating platforms in sharp relief, and sending beams glinting off the hovering vessels that moved lazily above the storm clouds. The news of what had happened with Princess Seralya and the human donor had spread faster than any broadcast protocol could suppress, leaking into every private channel, every levitating garden, and every hover cafe in the capital. Citizens paused mid-flight, teacups frozen in gravity fields, as digital projections blinked across their vision. The improbable act, the human standing beside a recovering princess, and the monitors that had registered a compatibility deemed impossible. Inside the palace, the corridors were alive with whispers that carried over polished floors and glimmering railings. Courtiers darted from room to room, discussing whether this human was an impostor, a miracle, or a hazard that required immediate monitoring. Even the usually unflappable robotic attendants, the gleaming silver models designed to anticipate needs before thought, paused in mid-sweep, sensors flickering as if unsure how to process the chaos. Marcus navigated the halls with as much dignity as he could muster, which was not much, tripping once over a floating floor panel and muttering something about the gravity calibration being a little too polite today. Seralya was seated on a raised dais in the center of the recovery chamber, her long ears twitching, responding to every tone, every inflection in the voices around her. Her silver hair was brushed back in a loose braid, glowing faintly as if still charged with the subtle bioluminescence of her veins. She watched Marcus with amusement as he attempted to balance a hovering tray of nutritional gels. Wobbling under the force of an anti-gravity field, he clearly did not understand. "Marcus," she said, her voice light and teasing, "if you intend to serve food, please try not to convert it into a planetary debris hazard." He blinked, holding the tray at arm's length. "I'll do my best. Though I must admit, gravity here seems opinionated." Her laugh, soft and melodic, echoed through the chamber. Opinionated, that is a polite way to describe it. The court had gathered in a tense circle around them, noble robes brushing the floor as they whispered in a language that vibrated with an almost musical undertone. The monitors, still tracking every heartbeat of the princess, displayed not only physiological data, but also reactions from the human, interpreting his nervous humor and awkward movements in a flurry of statistical probabilities. One senior official muttered about how this day would be remembered not for diplomacy or ceremony, but for what he called, with the faintest grimace, a human improvisational miracle. Outside the palace, holographic projections began appearing in public spaces, a series of animated sequences depicting the transfusion. Citizens watched, mouths open, some frozen mid-step as the narrative unfolded in looping holographic panels. The story of a human blood donor saving an alien princess became a living legend before lunch. In hover cafes, conversations erupted over floating pastries. One young Virelian commented, "Can you believe it? Humans clumsy as ever but apparently vital." Another snorted, nearly spilling her cup of fluorescent tea, "Vital, yes, but also mildly terrifying. Have you seen him trip over the conduits?" Within the palace walls, the situation required careful management. Advisors debated over ceremonial protocol, while scientists continued to monitor Seralia's recovery. Her long ears twitched, sometimes pivoting toward Marcus, other times toward the floating monitors that seemed to quiver with excitement at her restored vitality. The princess had regained enough strength to sit upright, her voice teasing, "Marcus, do you plan to follow me around forever, or is this just a one-time act of human heroism?" He reddened slightly, attempting to straighten his posture. Well, I was thinking I could, help with anything." He waved vaguely, aware that the court's attention had sharpened, and that his usual awkward charm might be his only shield. Seralya smirked, a flicker of amusement in her liquid metal eyes. "Anything, you say? Then perhaps you can start by not tripping over the historical records tomorrow morning. We would not want Virelia's cultural archives to float into orbit." The court, despite themselves, laughed. The tension that had gripped the halls moments before dissipated in small ripples of amusement, leaving room for cautious wonder. The combination of human humor and courage had altered the atmosphere entirely, shaking the foundations of tradition and showing that even in a society bound by centuries of ceremony, laughter could find its place. As the day progressed, Marcus was reluctantly introduced to the intricacies of Virelian culture. Hovering meal trays required a gentle push to avoid spinning, Robes were adjusted to prevent accidental levitation, and even the palace's artificial gravity seemed determined to remind him of its presence. Each small failure produced a ripple of laughter, even from Seralya, who watched with long-eared attentiveness, occasionally teasing, "You call this grace? Humans are truly experimental in motion." Yet, despite the levity, subtle shifts were occurring. Monitors displayed metrics that scholars had not expected: blood integration, hormone levels, and bioluminescent responses all indicated that Marcus's contribution had a stabilizing effect far beyond the immediate life-saving outcome. Debates arose about whether humans possessed an unexplored physiological property, whether humor and courage had a biochemical impact, or if the princess's long ears simply appreciated the absurdity of human presence. By mid-afternoon, a formal announcement was required. Seralya, now seated firmly in the central dais, raised her hand with a flourish, long ears twitching in a display of authority and amusement. Marcus, standing slightly behind her, was aware of every pair of eyes in the room. "Citizens of Virlia," the princess intoned, voice carrying over both sound and a subtle vibrational resonance, "today we have witnessed what some might call an extraordinary miracle. Others, perhaps, a human stumbling into heroism. Let it be known that bravery, humor, and occasional clumsiness are not mutually exclusive." The crowd erupted, some in formal applause, others in incredulous laughter, while news drones floated up to record the scene. Outside, citizens cheered, waved, and broadcast their reactions across networks, uploading reactions, memes, and commentary that ranged from serious philosophical debate to cartoons of Marcus tripping over floating instruments. In quieter moments, Seralya leaned toward Marcus, whispering just loud enough for him to hear, "You realize you've set a dangerous precedent. Humans might now expect to be invited to every royal function." He scratched his head, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "Well, I suppose I could try. Might improve interstellar relations, or just cause more hovering pastries to revolt." Her silver eyes gleamed with amusement, the faint bioluminescent glow of her veins pulsing with renewed life. "I suspect the latter is more likely," she replied, her voice rich with humor. "But let us see where this human unpredictability leads." Throughout the city, discussions raged. Scientists argued, artists depicted the scene in abstract holoart, and ordinary citizens debated whether humans were now essential allies, amusing curiosities, or both. Marcus, awkwardly following Seralia's lead, became a symbol of an unprecedented alliance between species, a living testament to courage, humor, and the unpredictable nature of life. And while the palace thrummed with recovery and celebration, every monitor, every floating device, and even the hovering garden plants seemed to acknowledge a subtle truth. One human had altered the course of Virlian history simply by being brave, foolish, and irresistibly human. The evening arrived with the twin moons casting a soft violet glow over the floating platforms. Seralya reclined in a ceremonial chair that levitated slightly above the floor, her long ears flicking with every sound. Marcus, balancing a small tray of nutrient orbs that threatened to drift into orbit, muttered quietly, "You know, I could get used to this minus the near-death and hovering instruments." She smiled, a playful glint in her eyes. "Oh, do not flatter yourself. I rather doubt the palace can survive your unique contributions long-term." And so the night settled over Virlia, calm but charged with a new energy. Humor, courage, and audacious human folly had reshaped a society, restored life to a princess, and left an entire world questioning the balance between tradition, technology, and the simple, stubborn brilliance of a human willing to step forward. The palace was quiet in a way that was almost suspicious, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something monumental or absurd to happen. Seralya reclined on a floating dais, her long ears swaying gently in the soft violet light of the twin moons. The monitors still pulsed lightly, a gentle heartbeat of light that mirrored her own, now steady and unwavering. Marcus stood nearby, attempting to hold a tray of nutrient orbs without letting a single one escape into low orbit. He failed once, and a tiny sphere rolled off the edge, only to hover lazily before him, obeying the subtle magnetic correction fields installed throughout the palace. He muttered under his breath, "Gravity, I swear it's like it has a sense of humor." Seralya glanced at him, her silver eyes gleaming with amusement, the faint luminescence of her veins rippling like liquid starlight. "You have a talent for chaos, Marcus. I might have to commission a new protocol just to accommodate your presence." He shrugged sheepishly, then attempted a mock salute, which nearly sent a hovering hollow display spinning into a wall. "IUH, serve at the pleasure of the princess. Is that still acceptable?" She let out a musical laugh, the sound echoing softly in the crystalline chamber. "Yes, though you may want to consider that the pleasure of the princess sometimes involves minor chaos, unexpected heroism, and occasional humiliation." The news of Marcus's heroism had spread far beyond the palace walls. Hovering drones carried the story to floating gardens, orbital settlements, and even the research stations anchored to the upper atmosphere of Virlia. Citizens debated the implications, some arguing that humans were now essential allies, while others insisted they were merely amusing, clumsy interlopers. Yet everywhere, humor accompanied awe. Hollows displayed Marcus tripping over cables, accidentally high-fiving an automated assistant, or nearly spilling liquid nitrogen used in ceremonial ice sculptures. Artists captured the scenes in glowing ink projections that floated above public squares, immortalizing his awkward heroism with both reverence and satire. Inside the palace, advisors and scientists argued less formally now, their tone tempered by laughter and incredulity. The physiological data from the transfusion continued to fascinate even the most skeptical, showing integration effects far beyond what Virlia's science could predict. The human blood had not only stabilized the princess, but had subtly enhanced regenerative processes, a finding that promised to redefine cross-species medical research. One scientist muttered to another, "I knew humans were messy, but I didn't think they were miraculous." Meanwhile, Marcus navigated the palace with growing confidence, though the learning curve remained steep. He had learned to anticipate the subtle gravitational shifts in hallways, the tendencies of floating utensils, and the precise tone needed to avoid accidentally insulting an alien noble. He had even begun to pick up some of the musical cadences of the Virlian language, though his pronunciation often resulted in unexpected fits of laughter from both humans and aliens. Seralya, observing all of this, allowed herself moments of gentle teasing, but beneath her humor lay genuine appreciation. The human had not only saved her life, but had managed to navigate the alien world with courage, curiosity, and, most unexpectedly, charm. One afternoon, the princess summoned Marcus to the central observation chamber, where he was confronted with a vast wall of monitors displaying his own exploits, each moment analyzed, celebrated, and gently mocked by the court and the public alike. "Well," he said, hands on his hips, "I guess I'm famous now. How diplomatic of me." Seralia's long ears twitched, catching the humor in his voice. "Famous, yes, and if you're lucky, only mildly immortalized in hollow art and public commentary. But you have changed something far more important than your reputation. You have shifted our understanding of courage, compassion, and human unpredictability." He looked at her, blinking. "Changed, you mean in a good way?" "Entirely," she said, leaning back, her fingers brushing a floating control pad that stabilized a hovering tray. "Our people will remember today not for political maneuvering or ceremonial pomp, but for the way a single human acted without expectation, without protocol, and with a fair amount of awkward humor. You've taught us that bravery need not be solemn, and heroism need not be elegant. Outside, the city of floating platforms reflected the rising twin suns, glinting against the violet storms below. Hovering gardens and skyways buzzed with life, citizens discussing, laughing, and marveling at the improbable chain of events that had begun with Marcus's audacious act. The palace drones carried records of the transfusion, debates, and artwork to orbital archives, ensuring that the story of the human and the princess would resonate across generations. Seralya stood, her silver hair cascading around her shoulders, long ears twitching with deliberation. "Marcus," she said, voice soft but commanding, "the choice is yours. You may leave and return to your human life, carrying stories of floating palaces and bioluminescent veins, or you may remain and continue improving my life with your unique talents." Marcus scratched his head, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "Well, staying sounds dangerous but exciting, and possibly more chaotic, but I guess I could try, if only to make sure nothing explodes." Her laugh rang like chimes across the chamber. "Excellent. Then it is settled. But be warned, your presence will forever bend tradition, challenge protocol, and occasionally disrupt gravity." Over the following days, the palace settled into a new rhythm. Marcus learned the nuances of Virelian culture, not without mishaps, but with a growing sense of belonging. Seralya recovered fully, her long ears flicking in delight at the human's clumsy antics and his occasional flashes of insight. The people of Virelia, once rigidly bound by centuries of expectation, found themselves reconsidering what it meant to act with courage, to laugh in the face of uncertainty, and to embrace the unpredictable. Even minor characters found resolution. The chief physician, once skeptical, now chuckled as he reviewed Marcus's integration into Virelian society. Junior attendants learned that humor could coexist with duty, and robotic assistants developed minor algorithms to anticipate human eccentricities, saving both themselves and their human companion from potential disasters. The palace, with all its floating halls, crystalline chambers, and shimmering platforms, felt more alive than ever, energized by the improbable friendship between a human and a princess. At night, the twin moons cast violet and silver light across the palace. Marcus stood by a window, looking out over the floating city, and realized that he had changed. He had begun his journey as an awkward visitor, uncertain, clumsy, and unsure of his worth. Now he was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of courage tempered with humor, a living testament to the value of small, audacious acts. Seralya approached, her long ears brushing lightly against his shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie and trust. "You've done more than save my life," she said quietly. "You've reminded us all that courage is universal, and that laughter can survive even the most perilous moments." He grinned, looking at her silver eyes that reflected the moon's. "I guess being human isn't so bad after all," he said, "even if we're awkward, messy, and occasionally completely inappropriate." "And yet," she replied, a teasing note in her voice, "it appears that sometimes humans are exactly what the galaxy needs." The city below pulsed softly in twilight hues, citizens hovering in quiet celebration, artists projecting their interpretations of the day, and monitors flickering with records of heroism, humor, and unexpected connections. The palace, floating above violet storms and beneath the twin suns, had witnessed the improbable, the miraculous, and the absurd, and had emerged stronger, brighter, and more alive. Marcus, once an uncertain visitor, now stood firmly as part of something greater, understanding the delicate balance of bravery, humor, and responsibility. Seralya, restored and vibrant, leaned against him gently, long ears swaying with amusement and affection. Together, human and princess, they had reshaped not only a society but the very definition of heroism across species. The monitors blinked quietly, drones floated with gentle purpose, and the city of Virelia exhaled in calm harmony. And somewhere in the soft violet glow of twin moons, the universe seemed just a little more curious, a little more amused, and infinitely more